four major forces gathered at Lark Manor, and the battle to protect the shelter officially began. Just after the Radiant Prosperity base was sniped and fled in disarray, Xiao Honglian made a call to Wei Dinghai. At that time, both had the same idea. They wanted the other to also experience the feeling of being hunted by a sniper. Xiao Honglian told Wei Dinghai, "Our journey is quite long, and we will probably be the last to arrive, but it won't delay the agreed time for the attack." Wei Dinghai said indifferently, "What a coincidence. We haven't arrived yet either. I was just about to ask about your current situation." After hanging out, both thought to themselves, "You guys should hurry up and experience being sniped too." Seeing that he had driven away two groups of people, Zhang Yi started to get bored. He proudly started the intercom with a few people. "These people are too weak. I barely made a move and took out dozens of them. Seeing them flee in panic really makes me want to laugh." Chun Lei looked up admiringly. "Boss is really powerful. Dealing with these minions is not that interesting. We should aim to kill the mutants, especially since we are on the front lines. It would relieve some pressure on us." Zhang Yi replied indifferently, "I can try, but the prospects are not great. After all, the mutants who have survived until now, especially those from the enhanced and beastman strains, cannot be fatally wounded by ordinary thermal weapons. You know that I only double my strength against weaker opponents. If the opponent is too strong, I run faster than you guys. My rebound attack ability has already been discovered by the enemy, so there should be no pressure from long-range firearms for now. With this, the first line of defense can hold out longer, especially since breaking through a city wall of ice and snow several meters thick without heavy weapons is very difficult. Who will be the next to experience my bullets?" Through his tactical scope, Zhang Yi quickly spotted a large group of approaching foot soldiers, at least 1,000, densely packed. Zhang Yi was slightly shocked. Shooting these people is simply a waste of bullets. He immediately informed the others, "The people from the Snow Worship sect have also arrived." Uncle Yu asked rationally, "Didn't we say yesterday that the Snow Worship sect and the Emerald Waterside base are our own people? What if they join the charge later? Do we kill them or not?" Zhang Yi answered without hesitation, "Anyone who dares approach the defensive line, no matter who it is, must be killed without mercy." With these words, Uncle Yu's expression relaxed significantly. He lifted a tarp in front of him, revealing a large amount of ammunition and two Gatling guns underneath. After the Snow Worship sect arrived, Jing Xian immediately sensed something was amiss. Logically, Radiant Prosperity and Morning Dew should have already arrived, but the scene was eerily silent. Little did he know that both had independently decided to pretend they had not yet arrived, wanting the other to suffer first. However, the Snow Worship sect had never really intended to play a deadly game with Zhang Yi. Jing Xian told his subordinates, "If Zhang Yi can withstand their assault and deplete the strength of the other factions, we will deliver a painful blow from behind. If Zhang Yi is easily defeated, we will have to break our promise and share Zhang Yi's shelter with them." Soon after, the forces from Emerald Waterside also grandly arrived. Their vehicles were primitive, but they had a large number of robust sled dogs. They brought over 500 warriors, and there were plenty of guns and ammunition on the sleds. After the four forces had successively arrived, Xiao Honglian immediately started a group call. "Is everyone in position? According to the original plan, we four will attack from four directions." Upon hearing this, Xing Tian immediately said, "Leave the rear of the shelter to us." Wei Dinghai expressed some doubt. "There's a mountain behind the residential area. Are you planning to fly over it?" Xing Tian thought to himself, "I'm just here to watch the show. I won't let them know I'm slacking off at the back of the mountain." Then he seriously said, "This kind of low hill is nothing to us. For this reason, their rear defense is definitely the weakest, and I want to catch them by surprise." Seeing the situation, Wei Dinghai could only say, "Then you attack from the rear, and the front will be handled by the three of us." At that moment, Xiao Honglian suddenly spoke. "When we arrived, we discovered they have a very strong sniper. You'd better be careful. Also, they seem to have a mutant who can rebound artillery attacks, so be cautious with long-range firepower." Wei Dinghai quickly agreed. "Ah yes, we just encountered that too." Xing Tian and Jing Xian, however, remained unfazed. They were only there to make a show of it, at most pretending to charge. They were not interested in this intelligence. Before ending the call, Xiao Honglian reminded, "At exactly 2:30, our four groups will attack simultaneously from four different directions." Soon after, Yang Xinxin sent a call saying, "Brother Zhang Yi, there are enemies appearing from the direction of the back mountain." Yang Xinxin, stationed in the control room, used the surveillance to relay intelligence to everyone. As he spoke, he also transmitted the video feed from the back mountain. Seeing that it was Xing Tian and his group, Zhang Yi instantly understood. This guy really has some brains. Knowing that the back mountain is a better place to slack off, he told Yang Xinxin, "Don't worry about those people. They won't launch an attack." Zhang Yi had already considered the direction of the back mountain when building the defensive line. It was easy to defend and hard to attack, and many landmines had been buried at the foot of the mountain. If they dared to break their promise and attack, it would be tantamount to seeking their own death. Just then, Zhang Yi suddenly shouted in a deep voice, "Everyone, be alert. The enemy has appeared." Dozens of armored vehicles grandly charged toward the shelter. Followers of the Snow Worship sect also charged from another direction with relatively weak firearms and even primitive weapons like big knives and spears. As they came within shooting range, Zhang Yi suddenly shouted, "Fire!" In the control room, Yang Xingxin decisively pressed the button. As the button was pressed, cracks suddenly appeared on the ice and snow city wall, and gun barrels and muzzles emerged from the crevices. The deafening sound of gunfire echoed across the entire front line, instantly turning the scene into a sea of fire. The intense firepower stunned all the major forces. Xing Yishan was particularly shocked, exclaiming, "There are cannons, tanks, and machine guns. My goodness, where did he get these big guys from?" Faced with such fierce firepower, everyone on the scene couldn't believe their eyes. This level of weaponry was only held by the West Mountain Base in the entire Heavenly Sea City. Could it be that Zhang Yi had raided the West Mountain Base's arsenal? How did he manage this in such icy conditions? West Mountain Base indeed had a large stock of heavy weaponry, but since the apocalypse, even moving these behemoths out of storage had been difficult, let alone transporting them here. It was utterly inconceivable. Xiao Honglian immediately ordered, "Spread out immediately. This defense line is just an ice shell. As long as we shatter it, we can approach the shelter, and then we will win." Xiao Honglian remained composed in the face of danger, because she firmly believed that if her people could get close to the shelter, they could breach it. By then, the people inside, including Zhang Yi, would have no choice but to surrender, because Wu Huiren had told her the shelter itself had no weapons defense system. It was merely a solid shell. Meanwhile, on the back mountain side, Xing Tian, who had planned to be a mere spectator, couldn't help but sweat at such a brutal scene. Now he suddenly understood why his old classmate dared to offend them all. His confidence was here. He silently congratulated himself on his wise choice to slack off on the back mountain. Nevertheless, he still told his subordinates, "Everyone, open fire and make a big show of it, but make sure not to hit anyone." A nearby soldier was puzzled. "There's nobody on the back mountain. Isn't firing a waste?" Xing Tian threw a punch and reprimanded, "Stop with the nonsense. I didn't ask you to hit anyone, just to stir up the atmosphere. Since we've taken their things, we must keep our word. I, Xing Tian, am not the type to kick someone when they're down." Xiao Honglian said to Wei Dinghai, "We might not be able to hold on like this. We underestimated the enemy's firepower." Wei Dinghai pondered, "This guy's firepower is too strong. We must concentrate our firepower to break through the perimeter first." Xiao Honglian urgently shouted, "Their defensive force should be concentrated here. They don't have many people. As long as we break through this ice and snow wall, we can turn the tide of the battle." Hearing this, Wei Dinghai immediately said, "Cover me with your firepower. I'll take care of this wall." Wei Dinghai's Ice Lord had a natural advantage in this environment. Thinking of this, Xiao Honglian immediately ordered, "All units, fire at will," in coordination with Morning Dew Base to breach the ice defense. At that moment, Wei Dinghai jumped out of the vehicle, immediately forming a solid ice armor around himself, and then dived into the snow. Soon after, with a loud boom, Wei Dinghai burst out of the snow. A section of the ice wall instantly shattered, and the mounted guns and cannons were also flipped over. Chun Lei and Uncle Yu were instantly dumbfounded. What the hell is happening? Zhang Yi also noticed the change here. Amidst the swirling snow, he could faintly see a figure covered in ice armor. Once the snow mist cleared, there was Wei Dinghai striking what he thought was a super cool pose and saying, "In this world of ice and snow, I, Wei Dinghai, am your king." Thousands of soldiers stormed into the defense line. Wei Dinghai continued to widen the breach. He pressed his right hand against the wall, and with the activation of his special ability, the massive ice fortress collapsed instantly like it was made of paper. Seeing this, Zhang Yi couldn't help but his pupils shrink. This terrifying ice ability, compared to Chun Lei, is hundreds of times stronger. At this distance, it was too far to unleash his divine might, so Zhang Yi had to tell everyone through the voice communication, "Begin the action." It's expected that the defense line would be breached. After all, it was unrealistic to rely solely on an ice barrier to stop the forces of four factions. But no matter, behind the defense line, there are Uncle Yu and Liang Yu among others. Wei Dinghai was reveling in his success at tearing a huge gap, when suddenly a chilling gleam flashed by, aimed directly at his neck. With a swish, Wei Dinghai ducked low, losing his balance and tumbling awkwardly to the ground. However, his cheek was still nicked by the blade. Looking up, he saw a woman holding a long sword, her eyes full of murderous intent, suddenly appearing before him. Wei Dinghai murmured, "To think it could shatter my frost armor." His frost armor was made of ice crystals, theoretically as defensive as vibranium, yet it nearly got his neck chopped off. Thinking this, Wei Dinghai did not wish to engage further in this icy environment, where his abilities allowed him to attack, defend, advance, and retreat. He instantly merged into the underground ice. Liang Yu frowned deeply and shouted, "Fatty, it's your turn." At this, Chun Lei activated his ability, lifting a large block of ice directly. Chun Lei was also shocked. He never expected to encounter another ice ability user. Seeing the situation turning against him, Wei Dinghai had no choice but to emerge from the ice. But as soon as he landed, Liang Yu fiercely slashed at him. With a crack, a half-meter long gash was opened on Wei Dinghai's chest. He clutched his chest and staggered back several meters, only to see his wound slowly healing. He hadn't expected Zhang Yi's group to have such a formidable close combat expert. Although his mission was accomplished, he no longer wished to continue the fight. fight and turned to disappear into the ice. Liang Yu wanted to continue the pursuit, but in front of her appeared countless soldiers from various bases, recklessly charging forward with various weapons. In response, Liang Yu took a deep breath and resolutely drew her sword and charged into the crowd. Seeing this, Chun-Lei was greatly alarmed and yelled at Liang Yu, "Teacher Liang, don't be impulsive." At this point, Zhang Yi said to them, "Let her go. I think she needs to vent. Letting her have a good fight might help release her recent stress. You two just continue to hold the gap. Their mutants are likely coming soon, and what follows will be a tough battle." Thousands of soldiers were charging towards the shelter. Xiao Honglian also seized the moment, took a swig from a gourd, and then spat out a long stream of fire toward the ice defense line, instantly melting the sturdy ice barrier. Seeing this, the allied forces' morale surged, and following Xiao Honglian's command, the werewolf and soldiers dashed towards the breach in the defense like a whirlwind. Just then, a fierce snowstorm erupted at the gap in the defense line as Chun-Lei activated his ability, summoning heavy snow to block the gap. At that moment, the giant Flower also stood in front of the gap, roaring furiously at the approaching soldiers. Flower's wild roar even caused some soldiers' eardrums to burst instantly. At this time, Uncle Yu also appeared at the gap, holding a Gatling gun and wrapped in bullet belts. After a roar, he locked the trigger and fiercely opened fire on the incoming soldiers, instantly turning the soldiers in front into a sieve. Meanwhile, outside the defense line, Liang Yu was in a frenzy. Her ability was quite simple, similar to Ling Fang's, enhancing her attributes, whether it was speed, strength, reaction, or even intuition, all were greatly enhanced. Already a martial arts master, with her ability, she was even more formidable. Each slash of her sword resulted in a soldier's death. Her ultimate target was simple, Xiao Honglian, who was not far away, breathing fire. To avenge her fallen students, Liang Yu slashed her way forward, attempting to close in on her. Just then, a sharp chill aimed at her neck came from the side. With a clang, Liang Yu blocked the lethal blow with Dragon's Roar. The werewolf looked at her with a predator's gaze and said, "It's not appropriate to chop down my people like they're vegetables, right?" Hearing this, Liang Yu suddenly burst into intense flames, and her pupils instantly turned a demonic blood red. This state was something even Zhang Yi and Yang Xinxin had never seen before. However, the werewolf, seeing this terrifying form, was not frightened but delighted. He stuck out his crimson tongue and coldly smiled. "Interesting." Saying that, he crouched down into an attack stance. His form began to grow larger and his claws lengthened significantly. Liang Yu stared intently at the werewolf while slowly sheathing her long sword. She steadied her stance, ready to face the challenge. As a top-level martial arts master, she was proficient in martial arts from various countries, especially in sword techniques. Aiajutsu was one of her most skilled deadly moves. The werewolf also possessed terrifying assault speed and impact. After a ferocious roar, his figure suddenly became elusive, followed by a rapid pounce that swept through like a fierce wind. The werewolf's claws were instantly in front of Liang Yu. Just as the iron claws were inches away from her neck, Liang Yu's eyes turned a fierce red, and her sword was drawn in that instant. With one strike, she severed his arm and sliced across his neck. The werewolf still maintained his charging posture as he passed by Liang Yu. However, after her hand rose and the sword fell, his head and arms slowly fell to the ground. Liang Yu looked towards Xiao Honglian's direction, her desire for revenge still evident. Meanwhile, at the breach, Uncle Yu, Chun-Lei, and Flower were defending with all their might, but the three forces also had powerful mutants, and although Uncle Yu turned into a dual Gatling Terminator, he could only kill ordinary soldiers and could not cause substantial damage to the mutants. Suddenly, a blue flash streaked from the side, and the next second, a figure appeared on Uncle Yu. It was Wei Dinghai's assistant, Chen Jingwan, who wrapped around Uncle Yu like a python and began to constrict. Uncle Yu tried to exert force to escape, but found no way out. Chen Jingwan smugly said, "Even heavy snipers can't hurt me. Your brute force trying to escape is just a fool's dream." Chen Jingwan's ability was Rubber Man, which was particularly effective against tank-like Uncle Yu. Fortunately, Flower noticed the scene and roared at them both. In terms of physical strength, Chen Jingwan was no match for Uncle Yu. The roar caused his eardrums to burst, nearly knocking him unconscious. Uncle Yu took the opportunity to break free and prepared to burst this guy, but even though he had lost consciousness, he was still tough as a leather candy that couldn't be broken or penetrated. Seeing their mutants joining the fight one by one, Zhang Yi frowned slightly. He knew that continuing this fight was very dangerous for them. He also didn't want any of his team to die because of this. He told everyone through voice communication, "Everyone, immediately retreat to the shelter," including Liang Yu. Upon receiving the order to retreat, everyone began to fight while retreating. Meanwhile, it seemed that Liang Yu might lose her reason and charge forward for revenge, but instead, she simply crouched down, picked up the werewolf's head, and turned to quickly retreat towards the shelter. After all, having fought and killed for so long, her ability had also been severely depleted. If it weren't for the sustenance provided by Yang Mi's food, she might not have been able to fight until now. This time, her efforts were not without reward. At least she had killed a powerful mutant. With the cover of Zhang Yi's sniper rifle, the group quickly retreated back into the shelter. At this point, Zhang Yi looked towards the still slacking members members of the snow worship sect in the distance and decided to punish them. Having fought so hard himself, he could not allow them to reap the benefits without effort. He said to Yang Xinshin in the control room, "Aim all fire at the snow worship sect." After Yang Xinshin's operation, the firepower network directed at the snow worship sect was instantly activated. The sudden barrage caught the snow worship sect off guard, resulting in heavy casualties. Jing Yishan, pointing in Zhang Yi's direction, angrily said, "You, Zhang Yi, really show no respect." However, he also understood that Zhang Yi was angry at their hesitation to act. Seeing this, Jing Yishan could only suppress his anger and thought, "It seems Zhang Yi's defenses were breached, but overall, Zhang Yi hasn't lost out, and we might not gain any advantage. It's time to take action." At this moment, Jing Yishan of the snow worship sect also ordered his followers to start moving towards the shelter. Then, the soldiers began to continuously throw smoke grenades around the shelter, quickly enveloping it in smoke and greatly disrupting Zhang Yi's sniper tactics. Uncle Yu and Chun Lei anxiously came to the rooftop. "Zhang Yi, the shelter has been completely surrounded. What do we do now? Should we abandon the surface buildings and hide underground?" Zhang Yi scoffed. "Why panic? The shelter isn't so easily breached. They don't have missiles." But no sooner had he spoken than a rumbling sound suddenly reached his ears. Through the smoke, a huge construction vehicle could be faintly seen slowly approaching the shelter. Seeing this, Zhang Yi was instantly alarmed and immediately opened a pocket dimension, pulling out boxes of grenades and C4, then told the two of them, "Go to the first floor and stand by. I'll give them a taste of this." Saying this, he shielded the window with a dimensional gate and began frantically throwing grenades and C4 out the window. Before those people could rejoice, a series of violent explosions erupted, instantly causing carnage and cries of agony outside. The grenades and explosives being thrown out of the window didn't stop. After all, Zhang Yi had emptied the entire arsenal of West Mountain Base, and there was no shortage of weapons and ammunition. While throwing, Zhang Yi coldly said, "Foolish guys, thinking you've succeeded by breaching ice wall? Little do you know, the shelter is my greatest reliance." The shockwaves from the explosions dispersed the smoke, and only then could Zhang Yi see clearly that the person driving the construction vehicle looked familiar. After thinking carefully, he remembered that this person was Wu Huiren, the manager of War Dragon Company. Zhang Yi had entrusted him with building a safe house in this shelter. Zhang Yi muttered, "So you had this up your sleeve? No wonder you were so confident to attack my shelter." As he spoke, Zhang Yi threw a large bundle of explosives at the construction vehicle. Just then, a figure suddenly appeared in front of the construction vehicle, rapidly expanding to over 10 meters tall. He bounced the bombs away like a spring. This was Chen Jingguan, who had nearly strangled Uncle Yu earlier. His ability is Rubber Man, and under normal circumstances, he is virtually immune to all physical damage. Under his escort, the construction vehicle quickly reached the side of the shelter. A long mechanical arm extended from the vehicle and, after finding the right spot, began cutting with golden flames. Xiao Honglian was still directing the battle. She commanded, "Everyone spread out and attack from the sides. Avoid his counterattack angle." This indeed caused Zhang Yi significant trouble. At that moment, the voice system also issued an alert. "The shelter's walls are undergoing high temperature cutting. Damage level 0.001%. Zhang Yi immediately sensed trouble. The wall would eventually be cut through. The shelter was constructed under Wu Huiren's supervision, so he knew exactly where to start cutting to make an opening. Nevertheless, Zhang Yi calmly asked the voice system, "How long until it is completely cut through?" The voice system responded, "Based on the current progress and speed, it will take approximately an hour and a half to completely penetrate." Hearing this, Zhang Yi felt somewhat relieved. "More than an hour? That's enough time for me to kill a lot of people." The walls echoed with the banging sounds of cutting, and Uncle Yu and others on the first floor were also quite worried. Chun Lei anxiously asked Zhang Yi, "Boss, do we need to retreat underground?" At this moment, Zhang Yi responded with a steady voice, "Don't panic, everything is under control." Meanwhile, sitting at the rear, Wei Dinghai and Xiao Honglian felt confident of their victory. In their view, although they had lost quite a few soldiers, as long as they could acquire the supplies from Zhang Yi, the fight would be worth it. Moreover, they could later divide the influence in the West Mountain area, likely replenishing both manpower and resources. At this time, followers of the snow worship sect arrived unnoticed among the crowd. Hundreds of snow worship sect followers blended into the crowd undetected, and some even embraced two soldiers, immediately pulling the pins on the explosives strapped all over their bodies. Xiao Honglian and Wei Dinghai were immediately shocked at the rear. How could there be such intense explosions among their soldiers? They had already conducted demoning during the attack, so it couldn't be landmines. Where did these explosives come from? At this time, a subordinate reported, "It's that group of crazies from the snow worship sect. They are strapped with explosives, and now they are coming to die with us." Wei Dinghai and Xiao Honglian were horrified by this sudden betrayal, a truly despicable act typical of a cult. But by the time they realized this, it was too late. The casualties of the two bases had already exceeded 70%, just over 300 people left combined, while the snow worship sect still retained a large number of forces. Just then, Jing Yishan levitated, controlling two damaged war vehicles, and viciously smashed them down from above onto Xiao Honglian and Wei Dinghai. Wei Dinghai used his control over ice and snow to block the vehicles, and Xiao Honglian similarly punched another vehicle away. The long-held grudges were released at this moment, and Jing Yixin felt a weight lifted off his shoulders, letting out a maniacal cold laugh. "You two accursed bastards, today is your day to die." The snow worship sect had endured for so long, paying a painful price in every dispute, but to secure a space to survive, they had no choice but to compromise time and again. Now, finally having a chance to breathe freely, he couldn't stop laughing. Under Jing Yixin's command, the snow worship sect launched a furious attack. Zhang Yi watched the entire process from the shelter, and suddenly his lips curled into a smile. Now it's time to finish them off. With the snow worship sect attacking from one side and then from the other, the two bases were caught between a rock and a hard place with no escape. At this moment, Uncle Yu and Chun Lei were eating and replenishing their strength, and it must be said that Yang Mi's ability truly came in handy this time. The food she prepared quickly restored their condition. They began to open the door and rushed out, furiously fighting the enemies in the crowd. Seeing the sudden change in the battle situation, Xing Tian from the back mountain also felt a chill down his spine. How did the snow worship sect suddenly turn traitor? What's going on? Luckily, I had formed an alliance with Zhang Yi, otherwise, today I might have faced the same situation as Radiant Prosperity and Morning Dew. This time they're all fighting desperately, only I remain completely unharmed and even gained 10 tons of supplies. Doesn't this mean that my Emerald Waterside base will dominate Heavenly Sea City from now on? Uncle Yu, carrying 2 Gatling guns and wrapped in bullet belts, wildly sprayed bullets into the crowd. Liang Yu, armed with a single sword, slashed through the enemies like a tiger among sheep. A frenzied slaughter, and Flower transformed into a giant cat and dived into the crowd, ferociously biting. Zhang Yi's shooting was even more ruthless, maintaining a rhythm of one head every 2 seconds in his merciless reaping. A mutant was pondering how to deal with the fierce enemies when suddenly a force of space around his neck began to distort, and with a bang, his head was instantly severed from his body. Until the moment of his death, he probably would not understand how he died. The mutant prepared to counterattack was immediately petrified with fear. The two bases were instantly thrown into disarray. Seeing this, Xiao Honglian and Wei Dinghai panicked. They hurriedly tried to contact Xing Tian, hoping he could bring his troops to their aid, but Xiao Honglian couldn't get in touch with Xing Tian at all, and at that moment she realized this guy must have also betrayed them. Wei Dinghai also panicked. Just now, he had clearly heard a major attack launched from the back mountain, but until the defenses were breached and the shelter was surrounded, he had not seen a single member of the Emerald Waterside base, which was already very obvious. Wei Dinghai shouted, "All forces from Morning Dew base, retreat." Then he told Xiao Honglian, "It's clear that the 3 bases have conspired together. You'd better order a retreat now, or it might be too late." Xiao Honglian was both angry and shocked. She could never understand how the 3 had come together. But now, anger was useless, and seeing the current situation, continuing the fight would likely lead to complete annihilation. With this in mind, she could only issue the order to retreat. After speaking, she took a fierce swig from her gourd and spat out a blazing fire dragon towards the crowd of the snow worship sect, instantly burning dozens of people to cinders. Xiao Honglian's eyes were filled with murderous intent, and Jing Yixin decided to avoid her wrath for the time being, no longer blocking their retreat. After all, Wei Dinghai and Xiao Honglian were the top combatants of their bases, and ordinary soldiers and regular mutants could hardly stop them. Now that his goal of weakening them was achieved, he couldn't possibly hope to eliminate them all at once. The 2 bases forcefully carved a bloody path through the crowd, and everyone fled in the few remaining armored vehicles. Seeing this, Wu Weiren, who had been cutting through the shelter, also had to give up and tried to flee on foot, but Zhang Yi had already set his sights on this threat to the shelter's security. As soon as Wu Weiren came into Zhang Yi's shooting angle, a bullet pierced his head, effectively eliminating any future threat to the shelter. In the end, probably only about 100 soldiers from the 2 bases managed to escape the encirclement, leaving behind countless bodies and vehicles as they fled eastward in disarray. Zhang Yi and the people from the snow worship sect did not plan to pursue them. After all, the snow worship sect had arrived on foot, and Zhang Yi understood the wisdom of not pursuing a desperate enemy to the end. Jing Yixin watched them disappear into the distance and began to shout with raised arms, "We won! We have won!" This was their first ever victory against the bases, and some people even embraced each other excitedly. Zhang Yi silently put away his sniper rifle. This chaotic battle not only destroyed the ice and snow defense line that took days to build, but also flattened the surrounding buildings, including the villa where Uncle Yu and Chun Lei lived. Zhang Yi watched the snow worship sect followers celebrating their victory together, and he even felt the urge to throw a pile of explosives at them. Those thoroughly brainwashed cult followers were terrifying, with their fearless fighting style making Zhang Yi deeply wary. He even thought that these reckless individuals were more dangerous than the base forces. However, Zhang Yi ultimately suppressed the impulse. He also knew that the snow worship sect's greatest resource was its people. Killing more of their followers would be futile, as they would quickly replenish their numbers through proselytizing, and he would only gain another enemy by doing so, which wouldn't be worth it. After going downstairs, Zhang Yi immediately called Xing Tian to tell him, "You can come over to take the remaining food," but Xing Tian quickly replied, "No rush, we still have some things to handle." This surprised Zhang Yi. What else could this guy have to do? But considering that Emerald Waterside had kept their promise this time, he didn't pay it much mind. Zhang Yi stepped out of the shelter to start cleaning up the battlefield. At this time, Uncle Yu and Chun Lei were nearly exhausted, and even Flower was panting heavily and lying on the snow. Only Lian Yu stood still in front, her gaze determinedly fixed on the direction in which the two bases had fled. Zhang Yi walked over and patted Lian Yu on the shoulder. "It's over. You've killed so many of their base's people. You've avenged your students. It's time to let go." Hearing this, the murderous look in Lian Yu's eyes seemed to melt away instantly. Suddenly, her eyes closed and her body began to lean back weakly. Zhang Yi immediately supported her against himself, and only then did he notice a deep wound on Lian Yu's body. Zhang Yi's expression sharpened, and he quickly picked up Lian Yu and ran towards the shelter, thinking that her reckless charge into the enemy crowd, slashing through the allied forces of the two bases like chopping vegetables, must have attracted a lot of fire, and it was a miracle she was still alive. Zhang Yi rushed into the shelter and called out to Zhou Keir, "Hurry to the medical room and prepare for surgery." Zhou Keir was also startled by the wound on Lian Yu's body. She quickly prepared medical instruments and medicine and immediately began to stop the bleeding and suture the wound. Then, Zhang Yi stepped out of the shelter again. It was time to deal with the aftermath of the battle with the Snow Worship Sect and Emerald Waterside Base. The Snow Worship Sect also suffered heavy casualties this time, with even mutants among the dead. Zhang Yi told Jing Yishan, "The territory of the former West Mountain Base is now mine, Zhang Yi's. Without my permission, no one is allowed to enter my domain." This battle also demonstrated the terrifying strength of Zhang Yi's team. Jing Yishan respectfully bowed to Zhang Yi and said, "Thank you for helping us win this war. According to our agreement, aside from missionaries, no one from the Snow Worship Sect will come near your West Mountain area." Zhang Yi also managed to smile and said, "Of course, I hate fighting and killing. I am a pacifist, after all." After speaking, Jing Yishan, chanting prayers with his followers, drifted away. In Zhang Yi's view, the biggest beneficiary of this battle wasn't himself or the only idling Emerald Waterside Base, but the Snow Worship Sect. Without the two major bases to check them, the Snow Worship Sect could freely expand its followers. Coupled with their leader Yuan Kongya's blessing ability, their number of mutants is bound to increase rapidly. It's unimaginable how much their power will swell if this continues. Thinking of this, Zhang Yi sighed helplessly. "It seems I've nurtured a monster, but it looks like I had no choice." Then Zhang Yi quietly walked onto the battlefield to collect useful materials. The coalition forces had brought their elite, and their weapons and equipment were of high quality. Moreover, several mutants had died in this battle, and Zhang Yi planned to absorb some. But he found it strange that although he had seen 7 mutants killed, only 4 bodies were relatively intact. The other 3 had been hollowed out as if their essence had been extracted beforehand. This puzzled Zhang Yi greatly. Given the intensity of the recent battle, it seemed unlikely anyone could have done this, but there was no other explanation at the moment. After collecting them all into his pocket dimension, he turned to head back to the shelter. Zhang Yi said to his old friends with a smile, "Let's go back and rest up. We'll have a big celebration tonight." At that moment, Flower jumped onto Zhang Yi's shoulder and affectionately rubbed against him. In this battle, Flower had been indispensable, having crushed countless enemies in its transformed state. Zhang Yi also affectionately stroked Flower's head. Then with his left arm around Uncle Yu and his right around Chun Lei, the 3 of them walked back into the shelter arm in arm. Not far from the shelter, on a snowy plain, Xiao Honglian and Wei Dinghai, leading the remnants of their defeated forces, fled here in disarray. Wei Dinghai, infuriated, recognized that this battle had severely weakened them, with their base's military strength nearly halved. He had been slashed in the chest by Lian Yu, and his rage exacerbated his injury. Xiao Honglian was also seething with anger. She was not surprised by the Snow Worship Sect's betrayal, but she couldn't understand why Emerald Waterside Base had also sided with Zhang Yi. If the Xing Tian Corps from Emerald Waterside had joined them, the situation would not have been so dire. Thinking this, Xiao Honglian couldn't help but want to make a satellite call to Xing Tian to thoroughly question him. But at that moment, Wei Dinghai suddenly stopped her. "Don't act rashly." Wei Dinghai analyzed somberly. "Xing Tian and his forces did not attack us like the Snow Worship Sect did, so I suspect that Zhang Yi offered him some benefits to keep him from taking action. Those guys have always skulked in the north of Heavenly Sea City, never daring to risk themselves. Plus, this guy is quite slippery, a clown who would be very happy with some benefits. If he can gain something without fighting, he'd definitely be pleased." Xiao Honglian still angrily said, "I had a clear agreement with him before. It's because of his betrayal that we misjudged the strength of our opponent. We can't just let this go." At this, Wei Dinghai sighed and said, "Now that both you and I are severely weakened, do you think going after Xing Tian for an explanation will get you anywhere? I think we're lucky if they don't kick us while we're down." But just as he finished speaking, a piercing roar suddenly came from behind them, sounding like an avalanche, or as if thousands of troops were charging towards them. Wei Dinghai and Xiao Honglian's faces changed changed simultaneously, and then they saw Xing Tian blocking their path with hundreds of his men. Xing Tian, sitting atop a demonic hound, laughed loudly and said, "Xiao Honglian, Wei Dinghai, why the rush to leave?" Seeing this, Xiao Honglian stiffly said, "Xing Tian, it was you who first broke our agreement. What do you mean by blocking our way now?" Xing Tian's mouth twisted into a cold smirk and said, "Don't you both know my intentions? Both of you are wealthy landlords, so it's not too much for me to collect the toll, right?" Faced with Xing Tian's blatant robbery, both bases were furious yet dared not speak out. Wei Dinghai then bluffed somewhat. "Brother Xing Tian, I can't understand why you didn't join the fight today. If our 3 bases had joined forces to take down the shelter, the entire West Mountain area would have been ours. By staying in the middle and doing nothing, did you already figure out Zhang Yi's true strength?" Xing Tian casually cleared his ears and said lightly, "Our Emerald Waterside base doesn't have the capacity to govern extensively. Unlike you, we don't have ample resources and transportation. In the end, we would just be making the wedding dress for others, gaining nothing ourselves." Zhang Yi, however, offered us 10 tons of food to stage this play. Why wouldn't I agree? He gives me 10 tons of food for doing nothing, while you offer me empty promises for risking my life. Even a fool knows which to choose. Xing Tian's words left them speechless. In fact, they indeed harbored such ulterior motives, having secretly planned how to divide the high-quality resources of the West Mountain area, none of which would have gone to their Emerald Waterside base. Suddenly, Xing Tian's expression changed as he said, "But back to the matter at hand. Now let's talk about the toll fee, shall we?" Meanwhile, inside the shelter, Yang Mi was extremely exhausted from continuously using her abilities to produce food. Zhang Yi didn't ask her to cook, but instead took out a full table of delicious food from his pocket dimension, planning to properly celebrate this hard-won victory. Then, Zhang Yi took a hamburger and a cup of milk tea to the medical room. Zhou Kir had just finished surgery on Liang Yu, whose injuries were very serious, but the surgery was successful. Since she is a strength-enhanced mutant, her recovery ability is far above normal, so she should heal quickly. At this moment, Zhang Yi finally breathed a sigh of relief, thinking that this woman was really tough. However, Zhang Yi understood this. Her desperate fighting was purely sustained by a fervent desire for revenge, persisting until the end before she collapsed. Zhou Kir somewhat admiringly said, "The abilities of mutants are really strong. I truly admire Teacher Liang." Zhang Yi laughed. He knew that Zhou Kir was eyeing the frost essence. However, since they still knew too little about the snow worship sect, he was not yet willing to use it on Zhou Kir. Zhang Yi affectionately pinched Zhou Kir's sulking face and said, "Your medical skills are much more useful than any ability. I can do without a mutant, but I can't lose you as a doctor. In my heart, you are the most important." Meanwhile, at the Celestial Tribute area, the headquarters of the snow worship sect, Yuan Kongya was leading a group of followers, waiting in the snow for the triumphant return of their warriors. This battle was a gamble on the future of the snow worship sect, but fortunately, Jing Yishan did not fail her mission, returning with half of the warriors to the snow worship sect. He reported to the leader Yuan Kongya, "Although we also sacrificed many followers this time, we achieved a significant victory. Morning Dew and Radiant Prosperity bases have been severely damaged by us. They are now greatly weakened, and will no longer be able to pose a threat to us in the future." As soon as these words were spoken, there was an immediate outburst of cheers and jubilation. The snow worship sect had long suffered at their large base, and this time they finally won a victory, marking a historic moment for them. Yuan Kongya stepped forward and took Xing Yishan's hand, saying, "You have worked hard, and the snow god will not forget your contributions." At this moment, Xing Yishan said with some guilt, "This time, we also lost many devout followers, including 2 mutant priests, Lin Fei and Meng Ziyuan." Yuan Kongya, holding her chest with a tender expression, said, "They did not die in vain. They have returned to my body, and now I can feel their presence." Xing Yishan spoke with a complex look in his eyes. "May every departed soul be with the leader." Then Yuan Kongya's eyes suddenly took on a sinister look, and she said excitedly, "We can finally preach freely in Heavenly Sea City. I want the light of the snow god to cover every corner of Heavenly Sea City, then the entire realm, and eventually unify the whole world. I want the snow god to become the only true god in the world, and the glory of the snow worship sect to last forever." With that, all the followers devoutly placed their right hands on their chests, and together with Yuan Kongya, they shouted in unison, "The glory of the snow worship sect will last forever. Long live the snow worship sect." Just after the battle of the 5 armies, Zhang Yi also made a name for himself, and no one dared to disturb them easily anymore. The shelter experienced a period of peace. The women started playing mahjong, Uncle Yu and Zhang Yi began playing chess, and Chun Lei and Lu Karen spent their days gaming. Even Liang Yu, who had been seriously injured, could now move around normally with her bandages. After this roller coaster of events, Liang Yu's temperament had also undergone a significant change. The indecisiveness of the past had disappeared without a trace, replaced by a subdued indifference. She merely nodded in response to others' concern. The redness in her seemed to have a detached realization about life. Zhang Yi was familiar with this. When he had discovered his own rebirth, he felt much the same as she did now. The battle had leveled the surrounding villas, so Zhang Yi simply had everyone move into the shelter. Having been through life and death together together multiple times, a certain level of trust had been established among everyone. Plus, no one knew if war would break out again, so it was safest for everyone to live together. Everyone in the shelter was enjoying a rare contented life, gradually becoming more relaxed to the point that no one even bothered to repair the damaged ice and snow defense line, and the thousands of bodies left from the battle were ignored. But one morning, as Zhang Yi came to the window to enjoy the snowy scenery, he suddenly noticed something odd about the scene in front of him. Although the snowfall varied, shouldn't it be too clean? The battle had only ended a week ago. How could there not be a single body in sight? Zhang Yi frowned and muttered to himself after some thought, I clearly remember seeing quite a few just yesterday afternoon. Could someone have secretly dealt with them? Zhang Yi took out his binoculars and carefully searched again, confirming it wasn't a trick of his eyes, nor were the bodies covered by the heavy snow. They indeed seemed to have vanished into thin air. Zhang Yi was startled. This world can no longer be explained by common sense. Creatures can mutate and gain abilities. Could the bodies have undergone some kind of mutation too? Zhang Yi took a sharp intake of breath, but still, he put on his combat suit and decided to go out and investigate. Holding his pistol, Zhang Yi stepped outside step by step. The bodies that had once piled up like mountains were now nowhere to be seen. Thousands of bodies had disappeared overnight. As he approached, Zhang Yi finally discovered some clues. The dense footprints on the ground only pointed in the direction of departure, with no traces of outsiders coming in. That is to say, these bodies might have stood up and walked away on their own. Just then, Zhang Yi felt a sudden chill behind him, as if something cold and dark was staring at him. But when he turned around abruptly, there was nothing unusual behind him. Zhang Yi immediately felt a shiver down his spine, even a sense of fear. Nevertheless, he took a deep breath and encouraged himself. Don't panic at a time like this. I've killed countless living beings. Even if there really is something foul, what harm can it do to me? Zhang Yi gathered his courage and followed the direction of the footprints, which were headed east. Zhang Yi didn't dare continue following them and soon returned to the shelter. He asked Yang Mi, who had just finished making breakfast, to call everyone. Quickly, everyone dressed lightly and gathered in the living room, growing tense at the sight of Zhang Yi in his combat gear. Zhang Yi spoke up, what I'm about to tell you, please don't be scared. Adjust your breathing and prepare yourselves mentally. I just went outside and discovered something very strange. More than 1,000 bodies outside the shelter disappeared overnight, and it's very likely that they stood up and walked away on their own. As soon as he said this, the temperature in the living room seemed to drop several degrees, especially among the women, who widened their eyes in shock. Show Kier, pale-faced, said in a trembling voice, Zhang Yi, that's not a funny joke, it's too scary. Being a doctor, she refused to believe in such messy, foul things. Zhang Yi shook his head and said, I didn't want to believe it either, but the fact is right before our eyes. You can go and see for yourselves. Zhang Yi reassured them, since this is already an era filled with mutated creatures, all sorts of strange occurrences aren't so unusual anymore. Let's not jump to conclusions. After breakfast, anyone who can fight, come out with me to investigate. After breakfast, several people changed into their gear and drove following the direction of the footprints, which eventually converged at an entrance to a cave and mysteriously disappeared. Zhang Yi and his group got out of the car and hurried forward, only to see a huge and profound cave on the snow-covered ground, a dark abyss without a trace of light, giving off a terrifying illusion of devouring everything. Chun-Lei couldn't help but murmur, what in the world is this thing, and why would those bodies come here? Could it be that some force is driving them? Behind him, Liang Yu also said, nowadays, the manifestations of abilities might be beyond our understanding, but if someone could control so many bodies to come here from tens of kilometers away, that mutant's strength must be incredibly powerful. Everyone at the scene fell into silence. Since the advent of the extreme cold apocalypse, at least 20 million people in Heavenly Sea City had died. If someone truly had such a capability, they could easily obliterate any force. Chun-Lei, shivering, said, could this be the legendary zombies? Zhang Yi shook his head. If it were really zombies, it would be easier to handle. With our current capabilities, do you think zombies would still be a threat? We're not even afraid of armed living people. What's the fear from slow-moving, walking corpses? Zhang Yi crouched down to examine the footprints and said, how are these walking footprints formed? Under such temperatures, the bodies should have frozen stiff by now. They should be moving by hopping forward, not walking like normal people. This doesn't make sense. While they were discussing, Uncle Yu looked around and suddenly said, this place looks somewhat familiar, like it's a subway station. Through the nearby residential areas, Uncle Yu slowly confirmed his guess. This station should be named Next Channel Garden Station. At this moment, Zhang Yi realized, no wonder this cave looks so unfathomably deep. It actually leads directly to a subway tunnel. Liang Yu frowned and said, could it be that something in the subway tunnel is controlling these bodies? Uncle Yu asked, so, what do we do about this cave? They absorbed over 1,000 bodies in one night, so there must be a terrifying number of bodies inside. What if this person becomes our enemy one day? Then we'd definitely be in for a beating, right? At this point, Zhang Yi waved his hand and said, let's pull back for now, pretend we didn't see anything. They haven't come into conflict with us yet, and if we can't beat them, we'll just avoid them. As Zhang Yi motioned for everyone to retreat, Liang Yu asked puzzledly, are we just going to leave the body issue unresolved? If it continues to develop, won't it eventually affect us? Zhang Yi's lips curled up into a mischievous smile. Let's not bother with it for now. After all, even if there really is a problem, definitely won't be the most troubling for me. The Heavenly Sea City subway system is extensive and spreads throughout the city, and Lark Manor is on the city's edge, with this being the only nearby subway station. The subway lines within other powers' territories are much more complex. If any bizarre incidents were to happen, they'd surely be the first to suffer. At this time, the Snow Worship sect was aggressively proselytizing within the territories of Radiant Prosperity and Morning Dew, attracting many survivors and followers, rapidly expanding the sect's scale in a somewhat chaotic manner. That day, Grand Cleric visited Yuelu neighborhood again. Since receiving the Frost Essence and awakening his ability from Grand Cleric, Li Jian had been using bodies in combination with his own sacrifice ability to produce food, helping the several dozen people of Building 18 survive until now. The cost of gaining this ability was that everyone had to follow the Snow Worship sect. Seeing Grand Cleric arrive, Li Jian led all the neighbors of the building to greet him. Grand Cleric looked at Li Jian and smiled warmly. It seems that you are now able to use the ability given by the Snow God quite well. Li Jian and the people shouted together, praise the Snow God, praise the great leader, and thank Grand Cleric for allowing us to receive the leader's blessing so that we could survive until now. Grand Cleric nodded with a smile. His gaze passed over Li Jian and lingered for a moment on Li Jian's son, Li Kale, before retracting. I have good news for you. You have passed the assessment and can now move to the Celestial Tribute area to live with the leader and all the followers. Hearing this, Li Jian and the others looked perplexed. They had gotten used to living in Yuelu neighborhood, and now that they were barely self-sufficient, they were reluctant to change their situation lightly. Grand Cleric saw their concerns and smiled. Don't worry, that place is a paradise in the apocalypse. All members of our Snow Worship sect are there, and soon it will become a utopia unaffected by the apocalypse. You were chosen, and that's why you are qualified to live there. Moreover, I have mentioned you to the leader. She appreciates your abilities and thinks they are crucial for the development of the Snow Worship sect. So as long as you go, you and your family will receive special care. Hearing this, Li Jian was astonished, as this fit perfectly with his ideal post-apocalyptic life. Building 18 had long idolized the Snow Worship sect, already considering it a sacred place. After all, they had survived thus far by the blessings of the leader, and now to be personally named by the leader was an immense honor. Li Jian excitedly fell to his knees. I am willing to go. I, Li Jian, am willing to offer my humble efforts for the Snow Worship sect. Grand Cleric was also pleased with Li Jian's attitude. Hurry and pack up. Follow me to the Snow Worship sect's headquarters. After a long half-day trek, the more than 50 survivors from Building 18 arrived at the Snow Worship sect. At this time, the Snow Worship sect was unprecedentedly flourishing, and the heavy snow seemed unable to cover the intense signs of life here. Grand Cleric stopped Li Jian. Come with me first. The leader wants to meet you personally. Li Jian was nervous, but he didn't forget about his family. What about my wife and son? Grand Cleric smiled. Don't worry, we will arrange everything for you. Even his wife stepped forward to encourage him. Being summoned personally by the leader is a good thing. Don't worry about us. Amid the envious gazes of everyone around, Li Jian walked towards the grand church. Pushing open the church doors, Li Jian discovered that the leader was actually a woman. Don't pay too much attention to external appearances. It's merely a vessel for the divine. Li Jian quickly bowed. I pay my respects to you, leader. My name is Li Jian, and I am fortunate to have survived until now by receiving your blessing. Yuan Kongya walked over and put her arm around Li Jian's shoulder, saying, Grand Cleric has told me about the form of your ability. You represent hope for the living. I have decided to appoint you as a priest of the Snow Worship sect. Your arrival signifies a harvest, guided here by the divine. You also have your own mission to fulfill. Hearing this, Li Jian was filled with fervor. He was a chosen one of the divine, with a special mission. Li Jian immediately knelt down and shouted loudly, I am willing to give everything for the Snow Worship sect. Yuan Kongya nodded in satisfaction and said, come with me. Soon after, they arrived at an abandoned building, and suddenly, an immensely large plant stood before Li Jian. Before Li Jian could express his surprise, Yuan Kongya said, this is the sacred tree of our Snow Worship sect. Its roots can reach hundreds of meters underground to draw nutrients and eventually bear fruit. This fruit is the main source of food for the Snow Worship sect, and it represents our hope for survival. As she spoke, Yuan Kongya handed Li Jian a blood-red fruit, looking at him with a slightly eerie expression, and asked, would you like to try it? Li Jian was still reeling from the shock, having never seen such a bizarre and huge plant before, and its fruit resembled apples yet was not quite the same. Li Jian took the fruit, and instantly a marvelous fragrance wafted into his nose, a tempting aroma unlike anything he had ever smelled before. As if possessed, he began to devour the fruit in large bites, and a viscous liquid, similar to blood, trickled from the corners of his mouth. After eating the fruit, Li Jian immediately felt full of strength, and his feelings of hunger and cold vanished instantly. Yuan Kongya told Li Jian, your ability can promote the growth of plants, and this sacred tree now needs more nutrients to grow stronger, so we can have more fruit to sustain more followers. Li Jian nodded vigorously and replied, "I will follow the mission of the snow god." Then, with a dazed look in his eyes, he walked up to the great tree, pulled out a dagger, and with a swipe cut his finger. It was just a shallow cut, but his blood flowed like water, and the sacred tree extended its roots to greedily absorb every drop, causing the entire tree to emit a dazzling green glow. Yuan Kongya did not let him continue to bleed. She walked over and used her ability to stop the bleeding. She told Li Jian, "From now on, the mission of nourishing the snow worship sect's sacred tree will be entrusted to you." Li Jian nodded, his eyes shining with a sense of glory, as if blood sacrificing to the sacred tree was his supreme honor. Time quickly passed, and half a month went by. Zhang Yi repaired the ice and snow defenses, and everyone began to enjoy life in the shelter. However, Zhang Yi remained vigilant, dedicating time each day to practice martial arts with Lian Yu. Under his influence, the others in the shelter also did not slack off. Uncle Yu engaged in strength training daily. Yang Mi did not stop creating food with her abilities, and even the usually lazy Chun Lei began practicing boxing. Since the Battle of the Five Armies, Chun Lei began to feel a sense of crisis. He had encountered Wei Dinghai, who possessed a more powerful ice and snow ability than his, and upon learning that Liang Yu also had the ability to devour mutants, Chun Lei became uneasy. Now, Zhang Yi, Liang Yu, and Flower all had such abilities, while he and Uncle Yu did not. This indicated that he was among those with lesser talents. Given Uncle Yu's close relationship with Zhang Yi, this made him feel like he was at the bottom of the hierarchy. Therefore, he was also eager to break through, to avoid being a burden to the shelter. After all, Zhang Yi was not the type to coddle the useless. Seeing Chun Lei's earnest efforts, Zhang Yi came over to share his own training insights. Physical strength is particularly important for abilities, but the mind is the most important. Zhang Yi pointed to his head and said, "Abilities are just our weapons in combat. It's important to enhance the strength of these weapons, but what's crucial is the mind that wields them. Just like how a stone thrown by a master can do more damage than a bullet fired by an ordinary person." Hearing this, it was like an enlightenment for Chun Lei. He had always been too fixated on the strength of abilities, but recalling how their leader had defeated Ling Feng, it was a case of the weak overcoming the strong. With this realization, Chun Lei's perspective suddenly broadened. He thought that although he didn't have the ability to devour other mutants, if he could develop his own abilities to their fullest extent, that should also be sufficiently powerful. Yang Xinxin had been continuously gathering intelligence, and she reported to Zhang Yi about the current situation of the major powers. She had successfully hacked into the networks of several forces, quietly observing all their movements. The network capabilities of Emerald Waterside and Snow Worship Sect were low, and they didn't even have dedicated cybersecurity personnel, making it incredibly easy to hack into their networks. Morning Dew and Radiant Prosperity had higher levels of network defense, and while she couldn't yet breach their core network areas, monitoring their daily activities was still manageable. Recently, it seems that Emerald Waterside Base has chosen to remain in isolation, showing no intention to expand outward. Morning Dew Base's Wei Dinghai has been seriously injured and has been contracting his defenses, even facing internal rebellion. The Dominion of Radiant Prosperity Base remains stable, thanks also to their oil refinery, which was not affected. As for the Snow Worship Sect, as the biggest beneficiary of the Battle of the Five Armies, they are frantically expanding their followers, undergoing disorderly growth. At the same time, within the ruins of West Mountain Base, the thick iron door of the fourth life pod suddenly made a loud noise. After several muffled sounds, with a bang, the door was smashed open. In the dark space, zombies with vacant eyes densely filled the entire passage. Large numbers of zombies converged on Zhang Yi's shelter. Zombies poured out of the fourth life pod at West Mountain Base, moving shakily towards the southeast as if summoned. At that time, in the shelter, Yang Xinxin had a computer on her lap, slowly updating Zhang Yi on the recent situations of several powers. Zhang Yi wasn't too surprised by these developments, but he couldn't understand why the Snow Worship Sect was so eager to grow its followers. Did they not need to provide for their survival? In this snowy apocalypse, ordinary people hardly make useful soldiers or laborers and are likely to be a burden. Could Yuan Kongya really want to be a savior in the apocalypse? Then, Yang Xinxin calmly explained, it might be a different situation. We are in an apocalypse, and the world's order is facing a reshuffle. This is when some powerful individuals start to show their ambitions. They started by slowly growing through religious faith, allowing them to quickly become the dominant force in Heavenly Sea City without spending a single soldier. Once they grow to a certain extent, they might even infiltrate the three major bases. Some of us could be assimilated. Finally, Yang Xinxin concluded, all this has one reason. The Snow Worship Sect wants to rebuild faith in this chaotic world and make their leader the god of this world. Hearing this, Zhang Yi couldn't help but laugh. He scoffed, that idea is just too naive and ridiculous. Yang Xinxin, with a serious face, told Zhang Yi, don't think it's just a joke. When it comes to life and death, even highly educated and cognizant people might end up kneeling. Zhang Yi gave a slight smile. You make some sense, but times have changed. Even if you have many followers willing to die for you, they stand no chance against modern armed forces. Just relying on numbers to rule the world is nothing but a fantasy. Yang Xinshin looked at Zhang Yi and said, what if their leader could awaken people's special abilities? Don't forget, Yuan Kongya's ability is to bless. Zhang Yi's eyebrows slightly furrowed. The awakening of special abilities is originally a matter of probability. Indeed, having more people can increase the number of mutants, but mutants are just slightly stronger humans. I've seen many mutants, and so far, very few can truly threaten me. There's no need to mythologize them excessively. But then, Yang Xinshin looked at him with adoration and said, the reason you feel this way is because you, big brother, are already so powerful. Zhang Yi knew in his heart that he had devoured many powerful mutants, including Ling Feng, the top fighter from West Mountain Base. He didn't have a clear concept of how strong he was at this point, but he understood that there's always someone stronger. Thinking this, Zhang Yi murmured with a determined look, this snow worship sect indeed needs more attention. While they were talking, a rustling sound from outside caught Zhang Yi's attention. Peering through, he saw thousands of figures appearing in the snowstorm, slowly approaching the shelter. Zhang Yi was stunned, thinking he was seeing things. After all, how could so many people appear at once in such a cold external environment? Even more than the soldiers gathered here during the last battle of the 5 armies. Zhang Yi quickly got up and activated the voice control system, immediately notifying everyone to gear up and prepare for battle. As he spoke, Zhang Yi took out his pistol, eyes fixed on the outside. Yang Xinshin maneuvered her wheelchair to the window and was stunned by the scene. How could there be so many people? Could it be that the other powers have regrouped and are attacking again? After Zhang Yi instructed everyone to prepare for battle, Uncle Yu was the first to arrive in the living room. Zhang Yi picked up a telescope and saw the vaguely discernible zombies outside, which sent a chill down his spine. Due to the extreme cold, the zombies were just covered in blue and purple bruises, without obvious signs of decay. Zhang Yi couldn't help but murmur, it has really turned into a zombie outbreak. Everyone was shocked to hear this. Then, Liang Yu stepped forward, took the telescope, and said, these things couldn't all have crawled out of West Mountain Base, could they? Zhang Yi puzzled, how do you know that? Liang Yu pointed and explained to Zhang Yi, look at the zombie horde, don't some of them still wear the combat uniforms of West Mountain Base? These must be soldiers from West Mountain Base, and the other thousands of bodies should be civilians from the 4th Life Pod. Zhang Yi was still confused. Under such extreme cold temperatures, how can these bodies not be frozen stiff and still walk like humans? At this point, Yang Xinshin calmly explained, these bodies might be infected with some special virus. They are now just the shells for those parasitic viruses. Zhang Yi accepted this explanation, but regardless of what they are, the first order of business is to go out and clear them. Saying this, Zhang Yi took out a submachine gun and said, remember, when shooting zombies, you have to aim for the head to be effective. At this moment, Lu Karen couldn't help but ask Zhang Yi for a gun to show what she could do. Zhang Yi thought for a moment and handed her a rifle, saying, be careful when firing, make sure not to hurt our own people. Immediately, Lu Karen changed into combat gear and followed the others out of the shelter. As for Flower, Zhang Yi didn't let it come out, mainly because he was afraid it would eat something indiscriminately. Uncle Yu, without a word, grabbed an engineer's shovel and charged forward. Zhang Yi shouted, just fire from a distance. Uncle Yu laughed loudly a few times. No need to waste bullets. Seeing this, Liang Yu also drew his long sword and charged forward. Lu Karen, excited, said to Chun-Lei, brother Chun-Lei, how about we compete to see who kills more zombies? Chun-Lei chuckled, you're definitely going to lose. Saying this, he and Zhang Yi began to fire fiercely at the horde of zombies. But soon, Zhang Yi noticed something was off. Zombies that were clearly shot in the forehead were getting back up. Could it be that they're too frozen, so the bullets didn't penetrate? Zhang Yi wondered. Seeing this, Uncle Yu and Liang Yu rushed over and jointly dealt the finishing blow. At the moment this zombie was killed, all the zombies seemed activated, suddenly emitting chilling howls, the sounds akin to wild dogs tearing at rotten flesh. The originally sluggish zombies suddenly moved as fast as hounds, swiftly surrounding Uncle Yu and Liang Yu. The two were surrounded before they could react, with every zombie hungrily opening its mouth and charging at them. These zombies, frozen stiff, made close quarters combat inefficient. Even though he and Liang Yu were both enhanced mutants, the zombies, even when chopped into pieces, still struggled towards them, causing their scalps to tingle. Continuing this way, once they exhausted all their strength, they would inevitably be bitten to death. Originally thought to be as slow as mud and fragile zombies, who knew they could suddenly become so fierce and seemingly difficult to kill completely. A portion of the massive horde of zombies split off and lunged at Zhang Yi and the others. Since they could not kill them all, Zhang Yi simply opened his special dimension and sucked in all the incoming zombies. Chun-Lei and Lu Karen finally breathed a sigh of relief, but before they could celebrate for a few seconds, the brainless zombies that rushed into the special dimension suddenly seemed to gain the ability to think and voluntarily stopped. This made Zhang Yi instantly feel that something was unusual. Normally, zombies are just mutated corpses and shouldn't have any intelligence, but these creatures could sense danger and stop, which was completely illogical. At this moment, a thought flashed through Zhang Yi's mind. Could these zombies be remotely controlled by someone? Could it be that someone has awakened an ability to control zombies? This possibility is indeed significant. significant. Nowadays, the manifestations of special abilities are extremely varied, and if such a type of ability truly exists, then all this would make sense. Thinking of this, Johnny suddenly realized, if that's the case, wouldn't this crisis be resolved by just killing the controller among the zombie horde? But with thousands of densely packed zombies in front of him, finding the controller accurately is like finding a needle in a haystack. Therefore, Johnny decided to use a brute force approach. He waved his right hand, and suddenly a huge tank appeared on the snowy ground. As Johnny climbed into the tank, he shouted, "Listen to my command. I'll count to 3, and you jump with all your might." Uncle Yu and Liang Yu immediately understood what Johnny intended to do. With their powerful leap, a loud boom resonated as a shell exploded among the zombie horde, sending limbs and parts flying everywhere. After landing, Uncle Yu and Liang Yu quickly retreated towards the shelter, but the horde of zombies relentlessly pursued them. Seeing that the effect was insufficient, Johnny leaped down from the tank. The moment he landed, he pulled out a specially made flamethrower from his special dimension and aimed it at the zombie horde. Following that, a fire dragon over 10 meters long was unleashed, instantly igniting the zombies' clothes, turning the horde into a sea of flames. Johnny had been worried that the burning zombies might charge at him, but the outcome left him dumbfounded. Thousands of zombies simultaneously turned their heads and fled in the opposite direction of the shelter. This scene was beyond belief. He had never heard of zombies tactically retreating before. It is now certain that these creatures are definitely being controlled by someone. When they realized they couldn't defeat Johnny, they chose to flee to preserve their strength. What would happen if zombies possessed intelligence? Not only could they coordinate with each other, but they could also retreat when overwhelmed. This scene left Johnny and the others utterly astonished. By now, Johnny was almost certain that someone was secretly controlling these bodies. Liang Yu also said, "How powerful must a special ability be to control so many zombies at once? If someone had such a strong power, shouldn't they have already dominated Heavenly Sea City? After all, bodies are the one thing not lacking outside now." Johnny couldn't help but look at the charred bodies on the ground, some of which were still twitching, just like severed earthworms. They seemed impossible to kill completely. Thinking of facing more of these creatures in the future, Johnny felt a headache coming on. This is just too eerie. If we don't figure out what's going on with these things, Heavenly Sea City might never have peace. While speaking, Johnny reached out to try to absorb the zombie fragments into his special dimension, and the process of actively absorbing them went smoothly. This also means that they indeed do not possess biological characteristics, but how they move in such a way is beyond comprehension. Anyway, it seems that these creatures can be burned to death. Saying this, Johnny handed the flamethrower to Chun-Lei and said, "Fatty, burn these things clean." After returning to the shelter, Joe Kier and Yang Mi were almost scared out of their wits. Yang Mi, holding her chest, said, "Can the dead bodies still come at us and bite? Could there really be ghosts?" Beside her, Joe Jaime comforted, "It's better to believe in such things and maintain respect." As a veteran actress who has struggled in the entertainment industry for many years, she has always firmly believed in these phenomena. She always felt that many things cannot be clearly explained by science, but do indeed exist. Johnny did not speak, but sat on the sofa, pondering the zombies from West Mountain Base. The day the three of them entered the base to scavenge for supplies, they actually felt something unusual around them. At the time, they thought it was just psychological and didn't pay much attention, so they sealed the entrance when they left, partly to feel at ease. Moreover, with soldiers disappearing into the subway station in recent days, all signs indicated that someone was behind this. These zombies not only knew to actively avoid my dimensional gate, but also knew to flee when they couldn't win, clearly showing the behavior of intelligent beings. Thus, there must be a mutant who can control bodies lurking in the shadows targeting us. Everyone agreed on this. At this point, Joe Kier raised a question. What's their reason for attacking us then? We haven't offended them. It can't be Radiant Prosperity and Morning Dew. If they had this kind of capability, they would have used it long ago. Why wait until now? Johnny shook his head and said, "For now, let's just wait and see. Anyway, those zombies can't possibly breach the shelter." Then, Johnny turned to Yang Xinshin and said, "Xinshin, check if there have been similar incidents elsewhere recently, to see if this is just targeting us, or if it's a widespread issue in Heavenly Sea City." He also instructed Uncle Yu and Liang Yu, "You two go check your bodies to see if there are any scratches or bites. In case it really is something like a virus, we need to stay vigilant at all times." After speaking, everyone quietly maintained a certain distance from Uncle Yu and Liang Yu, who were somewhat at a loss for words. Then, Johnny called over Joe Kier, intending for her to study the zombies. He was more concerned about something like a virus. If it really is the so-called zombie virus, this could potentially evolve into a disaster that covers all of Heavenly Sea City and even spread nationwide or globally. Johnny said with an increasingly serious expression, "I need to first confirm whether this thing is caused by a virus or is being controlled by a mutant with special abilities. If it truly is some unknown virus, it could be a catastrophe for the surviving humans, but if it's controlled by someone with abilities, that means there's an unknown and very powerful force still existing in Heavenly Sea City." Joe Kier said with a worried face, "Either outcome sounds pretty terrifying." Johnny comforted, "There's no need need to worry too much. We don't care about what happens in the outside world. We just need to protect ourselves. As long as the shelter can remain safe, we can continue to live well. Zhang Yi walked to the safe, opened his special dimension, and took out a zombie's limb. The severed arm's fingers were still twitching. Even the well-traveled Jokir was stunned. She couldn't help but say, "This is simply a medical miracle." Saying this, Jokir put on gloves and began studying the limb. Zhang Yi cautioned, "It's still best to take precautions. After all, we don't know how infectious it is." Jokir smiled lightly. "Don't worry, I know what I'm doing." Saying that, she skillfully picked up a piece of flesh with tweezers and said, "Brother Zhang Yi, you can leave now. I need some time to analyze this slowly." Zhang Yi was not in a hurry. "We still have plenty of time, and at this level, we can still handle it easily." Jokir also remarked, "It's good that our armed forces are strong enough. If this happened among other forces, especially organizations like the Snow Worship Sect, the outcome could be catastrophic." Indeed, that was the case. The Radiant Prosperity Base also suffered a massive zombie attack. The soldiers were initially in disarray, but fortunately, Xiao Holian's fire-based special ability naturally countered them. She leaped onto a high tower, and using high-purity alcohol she had drunk, she precisely spewed out a fire dragon at the zombies, burning them instantly into charred remains like an insecticide. Her subordinates kept bringing her large amounts of alcohol, and Xiao Holian had to keep pouring it into her mouth non-stop. It was almost entirely due to her efforts that, after burning countless zombies, they finally managed to fend off this terrifying attack. Xiao Holian jumped down from the tower, looking at her painstakingly managed oil refinery in ruins. She angrily said to her subordinates, "Hurry up and check out what these things are and who is behind them." At the Morning Dew base, they even deployed military vessels stationed in the deep sea area, using their main guns to counterattack the horde of zombies. Fortunately, the firepower was still fierce, and there were also a significant number of powerful mutants barely holding off the assault. Wei Dinghai frowned and said, "Where do these things come from? Are they monsters cultivated by other forces, or perhaps a previously undiscovered underground force?" Meanwhile, at the Snow Worship Sect headquarters, a group of followers were eating fruit around a bonfire. At that moment, nobody noticed a large group of figures slowly approaching the Snow Worship Sect from the darkness. The guard soldiers thought they were devotees coming to join, but as they got closer, they realized a large number of zombies were heading towards the Snow Worship Sect. The soldiers' shouts suddenly pierced the night sky. "Monsters! Monsters!" The zombies also violently rushed into their camp, crazily biting, and the Snow Worship Sect soldiers hurriedly organized a counterattack. But the zombies feared no weapons. Even when shot full of holes, they still crazily pounced to bite the living. The camp was suddenly filled with cries of despair, and with the rapid expansion of the Snow Worship Sect, the number of followers had grown to tens of thousands. With such a high population density, they had no space to escape. Desperate cries continually echoed through the camp. Scenes of zombies tearing flesh and the sound of gnawing bones were everywhere. The sight was like a living hell. The surviving followers could only run towards the church, with the zombies in relentless pursuit, about to rush into the church. Suddenly, the church doors burst open from the inside, and dozens of zombies at the entrance were blown away several meters. At that moment, the high priest, along with several senior members of the Snow Worship Sect, walked out of the church, furious at the carnage before them. Jing Yixian immediately organized a counterattack, commanding several mutants to guard the church and protect the leader and the followers inside, while all other mutants were to fight their way out. With the involvement of powerful mutants, the battle situation finally began to turn around. The beast-human hybrid ability user, Han Chang, activated his beast transformation state, and in an instant, a dozen cold glimmers flashed, swiftly decapitating dozens of zombie heads, which fell to the ground. Unexpectedly, the decapitated zombies still lunged at him, and Han Chang was shocked. They didn't die even like this. He continued swinging his claws with disgust, saying, "Then I'll just have to completely disable you." With several more flashes of cold light, dozens of zombies were instantly chopped into pieces. Han Chang said with revulsion, "What are these things? They can still move even in pieces." The defense battle was exceptionally tough, with an overwhelming number of zombies. The mutants were only focused on plunging into the zombie crowd to kill frenziedly, hardly having time to protect the other ordinary followers. The battle lasted for 2 hours, and the ground was piled high with bodies, indistinguishable whether they were zombies or followers. Jing Yixian came over to tell Han Chang, "Let's have everyone move the bodies into that abandoned building. Also, check for any injuries. These zombies are too bizarre. I fear it might be some kind of biochemical virus. Everyone involved in the fight must be quarantined and observed for a while, and we also need to step up patrols and guard against more zombie attacks." Han Chang also told Jing Yixian, "These things are unusual. These aren't the brainless zombies from the movies. Not only are they hard to kill, but they also know how to retreat. If this is the work of other forces, I must go and fight them." Now that the Snow Worship Sect has greatly immediately increased its strength. It no longer fears any base organization. Xing Yixin hurriedly advised, "Don't be impulsive. The most important thing now is to protect the followers. We definitely need to investigate this matter thoroughly. We can't yet be sure if it's related to the other forces." Xing Yixin stood in the center of the square, looking into the distance, and murmured softly, "Has a new storm arisen?" Zhang Yi called Xing Tian at the Emerald Waterside base. Hearing this, Xing Tian was incredibly agitated. "No way. We were also attacked by zombies yesterday. It cost us over 100 workers. These unknown monsters, could it be some kind of biochemical crisis?" Hearing that the Emerald Waterside base was also not spared, Zhang Yi breathed a sigh of relief. This meant that the zombie attacks were not solely targeting them. Zhang Yi, frowning, said to his old classmate, "These monsters are strange. They don't die even when beheaded. I suspect someone is manipulating them from behind. But our two locations are over 100 kilometers apart, and we were attacked by zombies at almost the same time. Doesn't this suggest that there's more than one person controlling the zombies?" Xing Tian tapped his forehead. He had always just wanted to live peacefully in his own territory, but why were there always so many troubles? Hearing what Zhang Yi said, Xing Tian somewhat defensively yelled out, "Are you saying there's an organization in Heavenly Sea City that can control zombies? Wouldn't that organization be invincible? After all, Heavenly Sea City now has at least tens of millions of corpses. If they keep attacking us in turns, we can't afford it. Also, even if your shelter is sturdy, it surely can't withstand so many zombies smashing into it every day." Xing Tian's words indeed make sense. We still don't know who the instigator of the zombies is. Enemy hidden, us exposed. This is the situation Zhang Yi least wants to face. Zhang Yi sighed helplessly and said, "Now, we can only leave it to fate. Contact the other groups and see if they've experienced similar attacks." After exchanging information, Zhang Yi fell into deep thought. Sure enough, early the next morning, a large number of zombies attacked again. Zhang Yi didn't hesitate to put on his combat suit and said, "Let's get to work." This time, he even brought Flower, but he repeatedly warned Flower not to bite with her mouth. With the experience from last time, Uncle Yu and Liang Yu did not rush into the horde impulsively. Chun Lei used his ice and snow abilities to restrict the zombies' movements, while Zhang Yi and Uncle Yu attacked the horde with flamethrowers. Liang Yu and Flower were responsible for clearing zombies that tried to get close. With everyone's tacit cooperation, Zhang Yi gradually noticed something. When the zombies were engulfed by Chun Lei's blizzard, they seemed to lose their sense of direction, indicating that there must be a controller among the zombie horde. Shou Kir was also observing the battlefield situation from inside the house. She noted down her observations and murmured, "Just as I suspected, the virus inside the zombies prefers cold and fears heat. When exposed to high temperatures, it becomes inactive, so using fire is the most effective strategy." With the experience from last time, they quickly killed nearly half of the zombies, and the remaining zombies predictably began to retreat. Seeing this, Zhang Yi felt something was not quite right. A sense of unease slowly emerged in his heart. Chun Lei stepped forward and asked, "Boss, what's wrong?" Zhang Yi frowned and said, "Yesterday we dealt with a large number of zombies, but today there are clearly more. This indicates that the zombie virus is still spreading, and more bodies are slowly turning into zombies. If this continues, one day the entire Heavenly Sea City will be filled with zombies. How will we live then?" Hearing this, everyone's eyes widened, and a sense of invisible pressure suddenly overwhelmed them. Who is controlling the zombies from behind? What exactly is their scheme? Zhang Yi was already worried that if this trend continues, the entire Heavenly Sea City would soon be overrun by tens of millions of zombies, and then we would no longer be able to move outside. Zhang Yi's words instantly erased the smiles from everyone's faces. Yang Xinxin took a sip of her coffee and said with a worried face, "I think it's not necessary to be so pessimistic yet. Things may not develop in that direction. If their goal was really that clear, they wouldn't just send a few thousand zombies each time." Then she shifted the conversation. "However, if we don't investigate the true nature of these zombies soon, they will definitely become a huge problem for us." Lu Karen also sighed. "It's a pity the temperature is so low now. Otherwise those zombies would have rotted into skeletons long ago." Zhang Yi said sternly, "Zombies are actually not scary. What we need to worry about is the controller behind them. Those controllers are definitely not brainless monsters, and these zombies are so hard to kill. The only known methods are fire and dismemberment, which puts us in a very passive position." Yang Xinxin immediately understood. "So the key is to deal with the controllers behind them first. Otherwise we will never have peace." Zhang Yi smiled and said, "That's the theory, but finding the controller is easier said than done. Every time we kill more than half, they immediately flee. I can't even be sure that the controller is among the zombies, as the forms of special abilities are too varied to deduce using common sense. We also can't possibly investigate deep inside the subway. It would be too dangerous." As everyone was discussing fervently, Zhou Kir spoke softly, "Actually, I've also made a small discovery. In the last few days while studying the zombie limbs, I indeed found something like a virus. This organism is extremely cold resistant, even surviving at -100 degrees. It can invade the host's nervous system to control the body, but it does not belong to the category of viruses in modern biology. Its structure is between a virus and a cell, but its biological characteristics are more similar to a virus. Zhang Yi, confused, said, "Don't make it so complicated. Say something everyone can understand." Zhou Qi, embarrassed, smiled and said, "When the Ice Age apocalypse came, influenced by gamma rays, the entire field of biology was redefined. Let's just call it the zombie virus for now. This zombie virus has a colony-like nature. When zombies are within a horde, they connect with each other. They show a certain pattern in their actions, and can even exhibit a degree of intelligence. But the piece I studied was just a limb, and all its characteristics were significantly weakened. However, based on my assessment, this virus is similar to a biological species. They have a common mother body, and the mother can remotely control them. However, the remote control distance shouldn't be too long. Just like some animals can communicate through sense, these zombie viruses surely have their own unique way of signal interaction." Hearing this, Zhang Yi had an epiphany and said, "According to you, if we find and kill the mother body, these zombies will automatically die, right? Although it's still unclear if killing the mother body would cause the other zombies to die. At least it would make them lose their intelligence. Once they become like headless chickens, they'll be much easier for us to deal with." Zhang Yi's words brightened everyone's mood. "Isn't this the mystery that's been troubling me?" Zhang Yi continued, "I think I understand now. The attacks by the hordes these past few days seemed fierce and intelligent, but upon closer observation, their tactics are actually very simple and childish. Both times, after nearly half of the zombies were killed, they chose to retreat, which feels just like a 3-year-old playing a game. Just like a child learning to talk and walk. They are just slowly figuring things out." Everyone felt this made a lot of sense. The horde indeed exhibited some intelligence, but not much. Then Liang Yu spoke, "Listening to you, I think I understand too. Those zombies may have some intelligence, possibly due to mutations after human death, or the mutant virus took over human bodies. In any case, they have only recently acquired intelligence and are still learning human combat methods." Zhang Yi also felt this was likely the case. Their method of fighting doesn't seem like that of a normal human intelligence, but they are not completely mindless either. If such a thing really exists, it might be called a zombie king. After all, if living organisms can acquire special abilities, then it's not completely impossible for dead ones to do so as well. Zhang Yi spoke in a low tone. "If it really is a case of corpses gaining intelligence through mutation, then their attacks will definitely continue. We can also use this opportunity to gather more information. We must not overlook any details to find ways to deal with them. However, our current priority is to clear the nearby hordes of zombies. Otherwise, the hordes will keep coming and harass us, making it hard to ensure there won't be any accidents." Zhang Yi also knew that these zombies are not humans. They do not have a sense of reverence, and they will still come to harass us brainlessly even knowing they can't win. This is undoubtedly like a ticking time bomb. We must solve this problem as soon as possible. At this moment, Liang Yu raised a question. If it really is a case of corpses mutating and gaining intelligence, then how do we explain the zombie hordes at other forces? It surely can't be launching attacks at several major forces at the same time, can it? Yang Xinxin, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "It's the subway network. After the apocalypse, no one has ventured into the subway tunnels, which are dozens of meters deep, but it's not hard to know that the temperature underground would be much higher than on the surface. Moreover, our zombies here likely originate from the next Channel Garden Station. Heavenly Sea City has more than a dozen subway lines, and zombies could use them to reach any area." Zhang Yi nodded thoughtfully. "It seems that the reason why we face smaller hordes is because we are located in the suburbs, and we only have the next Channel Garden Station here." Then, Zhang Yi said to Yang Xinxin, "Xinxin, continue to monitor the recent situation of the other forces through the network, especially information about zombies. We must find a way to solve this once and for all. As for the other forces, we can only leave it to fate. Their days will definitely not be easy." Although the three major forces all have underground shelters, they all have important surface facilities, such as oil refineries, steel plants, and ports, all of which are essential for their survival. They will inevitably choose to defend these places, which means they will inevitably keep dealing with the zombies. The worst off would probably be the Snow Worship sect. Their living environment offers no defense against zombies, and given their large number of followers, they would inevitably suffer heavy casualties in the event of a zombie attack. The zombie horde came again, but this time it was at midnight. Fortunately, Zhang Yi and his team were prepared and had arranged for people to take turns keeping watch. As soon as they saw the horde approaching, they immediately got ready to meet the battle. Zhang Yi, carrying a flamethrower, cautiously said to the others, "This time they've switched to attacking at night, possibly because they think we perform better during the day. And unlike the previous two times, they aren't just rushing at us in groups brainlessly. This time they spread out early on, approaching the shelter like a swarm of insects. It seems like they've really gotten smarter. We had set up a gasoline trap in advance, but now it seems like it won't be as effective." Zhang Yi, observing the zombie horde, said seriously, "It seems our analysis was correct. This group of zombies is indeed evolving and has figured out different tactics. Each of their attacks is actually a mission to gather intelligence. Once they grasp all our combat methods, we might end up confined to our shelter. Today I want to confirm confirmed my suspicion. None of the zombies that came this time will escape. I want them all eliminated. Saying this, Johnny jumped onto Flower's back, ready to flank from behind. Uncle Yu laughed. Finally, we can have a real fight today. Chun-Li, however, wasn't as enthusiastic. Just a bunch of corpses. What's so thrilling about that? It's not as exciting as playing games in the shelter. Uncle Yu laughed. You can take this chance to practice your abilities. Just as he finished speaking, Chun-Li activated his abilities, instantly freezing the zombie horde in front of him with a blizzard. Seeing the opportunity, Uncle Yu started his flamethrower and sprayed wildly at the horde. Liang Yu, wielding his long sword, darted around the perimeter of the horde like lightning. While the firepower drew their attention, Zhang Yi and Flower quickly moved to cut off the zombies' escape route from the back. Zhang Yi, carrying a gun, fired intensely at the horde, and at that moment, Flower was ready to charge. Zhang Yi smoothly jumped off Flower's back, and then Flower transformed into a giant steel ball, rolling over the zombie horde. Every hair on Flower's body was like a sharp knife, instantly crushing the zombies into pieces. The 4 people and 1 beast used guerrilla tactics, surrounding the zombie tide like sheepdogs herding sheep. Zhang Yi continuously observed the condition of the horde, wanting to confirm whether the zombie king was among them or if it was controlling the horde from a farther distance. Sure enough, when a certain number of the horde had fallen, the zombies began to panic and turned around to sprint towards the direction of next Channel Garden Station. Zhang Yi, pulling up his gun, sneered, "Why the hurry to leave after coming all this way?" The next second, Flower and Zhang Yi began a frenzied slaughter, and within just a few minutes, the zombies were nearly completely annihilated. Zhang Yi intentionally left 1 zombie alive and suddenly jammed an infrared camera into its eye socket. Chun-Li, puzzled, asked, "Boss, do you have some kind of clever plan?" Zhang Yi confidently crossed his arms and said, "In today's battle, I realized that the so-called zombie king is not among the horde. These zombies were sent only to gather our intelligence and then report back to the zombie king. Once the zombie king has mastered enough combat techniques, the Real army will probably come." Zhang Yi's eyes started to look sinister, so I decided to turn the tables and take the initiative. Liang Yu then asked, "Do you mean we should take the offensive, scout out the depths of the subway, and then wipe out the zombies' lair in one fell swoop?" Zhang Yi said, "The best defense is a good offense. We need to strike first." Considering the attack patterns of these 3 zombie waves, they are indeed continuously evolving and changing. If we keep dragging this out, I'm afraid they will find our weaknesses. We can't afford that risk. After speaking, Zhang Yi kicked the zombie away, and it quickly got up and ran towards the direction of the subway station without looking back. Zhang Yi and the others watched as the zombie carrying the infrared camera left. Now let's see how much useful information this little brother can bring us. After returning inside, Zhang Yi and the others began to draft a detailed battle plan. Zhang Yi immediately turned on the monitor, and the other end of the infrared probe displayed a horrifying scene. The subway station was densely packed with zombies. The dark view hardly showed any human figures, just a sea of crimson eyes everywhere. Chun-Li, frightened, felt a chill on his scalp. "That's way too many." Uncle Yu, however, was unfazed and said, "That's pretty normal. Think about how many people have died in Heavenly Sea City. At least close to 20 million, right?" As soon as he finished speaking, Chun-Li immediately hugged himself like a delicate 300-pound girl. "No way. Are we going to turn into zombies too?" Yang Xingxing explained from the side. "Turning into a zombie requires the spread of the virus. It shouldn't happen in the short term, but if enough time passes, it's hard to say." Zhang Yi helplessly smiled and said, "With over 10 million corpses in Heavenly Sea City, it's impossible for us to preemptively deal with all of them. As long as there are corpses, there's the possibility of them turning into zombies. So we need to solve this from the source. We must quickly eliminate the mother zombie king, otherwise, the trouble will only get bigger." Just then, a distinctly larger heat source appeared on the screen. It looked like a human, but was taller and thinner, probably about 3 meters tall. While still in shock, a pair of crimson eyes came close to the camera, revealing an eerily strange smile. Everyone was startled by this sudden appearance. Zhang Yi stood up abruptly and shouted, "To be discovered so easily." A few seconds later, Zhang Yi laughed again and said, "But it wasn't all for nothing. At least we know now where the zombie king is. That blue face is very likely the zombie king. We must eliminate it quickly, or we will never have peace." At that moment, Chun-Li came over and asked, "Boss, you're not planning to just go there and fight, are you? It's so dark there, and there are so many zombies. We simply can't kill them all." Yang Xingxing also added, "And the subway network is extensive. If the zombie king senses danger, it will definitely choose to flee immediately." Zhang Yi, with his arms crossed and in a grave tone, said, "If we're going to do this, it must be once and for all. But if we go down there, we really need to figure out a way to prevent them from escaping." At that moment, Liang Yu said, "We can start at Song Village Station, destroy it first, so we can cut off their escape route. Our target target is to kill the zombie king. As long as it doesn't escape, that's enough. As for the other lesser zombies, we have plenty of time to deal with them. Uncle Yu, eager for action, said, Zhang Yi, when do we start? You need to make the final decision, but it looks like this battle is inevitable. I think a quick resolution is best, to avoid prolonged trouble. Zhang Yi took a deep breath, thought for 2 minutes, and then said with a firm tone, get ready immediately. We act tomorrow. Everyone nodded in agreement, with no objections, except Chun-Lei, who looked worried and asked, Boss, isn't tomorrow a bit rushed? This isn't like your style. What if there are unknown complications underground? Maybe we've underestimated the zombies' combat capabilities, or perhaps there's more than one zombie king. Chun-Lei has always prioritized safety first, often even more cautious than Zhang Yi. However, while Zhang Yi is cautious, Chun-Lei is overtly fearful. Zhang Yi smiled mysteriously and said, Don't worry, fatty. When have I, Zhang Yi, ever fought a battle I wasn't sure of? I've prepared thoroughly. I would never joke with everyone's lives. Hearing Zhang Yi say this, Chun-Lei was considerably reassured, but he still sneakily looked at Zhang Yi and asked with a grin, Boss, if you have any clever plan, why not just tell everyone? It would give everyone some peace of mind. Why make it all so mysterious? Zhang Yi patted his chest and said to everyone, You just need to know that even if we encounter the most dangerous situation, I have a way to get us all out safely. As for the details, let's not talk about them for now. Liang Yu glanced at Zhang Yi and said, Since you've said so, then we have nothing to worry about. Yang Mi also came over from the side. Then I'll go and prepare some more food. Zhang Yi's situation had stabilized for now. At least they had basically grasped the movements of the zombie horde and confirmed the existence of something like a zombie king. In contrast, the other forces were faring much worse. The Radiant Prosperity base had been barely holding on each time thanks to Xiao Holian's fire attacks, and gradually, Xiao Holian also realized something was amiss. This relentless, continuous onslaught made Xiao Holian feel a deep unease. Each wave of zombies cost them dozens of soldiers, which they simply couldn't afford. Continuing this way, they would be forced to abandon the oil refinery and retreat into the underground shelters to evade the zombie waves. She also noticed that the zombies' tactics were evolving with each attack. Thinking this, Xiao Holian immediately decided to change her approach from passive to active. Zhuge Jingding's pupils shrank as she asked nervously, Does the leader mean to take the initiative and attack the zombies' lair? Xiao Holian nodded and said, It's clear that someone is controlling these zombies, possibly a mutant or some other intelligent creature. In any case, we can't just sit here and wait to die. Zhuge Jingding frowned and asked, But it's really too dangerous. We don't know the full scale of the zombie horde, and rashly going to scout could be a one-way trip. Why not see what moves the other forces are making? Maybe they have a better strategy. Xiao Holian laughed. Considering the scale of these zombies, I'm sure the others are suffering too, especially those self-righteous folks at the Snow Worship sect. They've developed tens of thousands of followers, which is practically like gathering lunch for the zombies. Now we can only rely on ourselves. That's decided then. Let Donghu take 2 mutants and 30 elite troops to secretly scout out the zombies' lair first. At the same time, at the headquarters of the Snow Worship sect, Jing Yixian received a report from his subordinates stating that the death toll among the followers had reached over 1,000, and those bitten had the potential to mutate. The newly recruited followers' faith had been severely shaken, and they could no longer continue this way. Jing Yixian, with an expressionless face, calmly said, Let them complain. I doubt they have the courage to take any substantive action. He then quietly told his subordinate, Arrange for some reliable people to spread some news among the followers, saying that other forces are retreating step by step in the face of the zombie tide, with most of them severely wounded or even on the verge of collapse. Also say that almost all survivors outside have been bitten to death by zombies. Sticking together in the Snow Worship sect, there is at least a slim chance of survival. This way, they'll feel that their current life is not so bad. Gradually, they will understand that being able to join our Snow Worship sect is their honor. After hearing Jing Yixian's words, Wu Wan immediately exclaimed how brilliant it was. Without comparison, there is no harm. As long as they feel that the Snow Worship sect is the best refuge, they will gradually become more devout. Jing Yixian gave him a warning look, a meaningful smile appearing at the corner of his mouth. But we also need to intensify our indoctrination, making them follow our Snow Worship sect wholeheartedly. Wu Huan, excited, clapped his hands in approval. The high priest is truly wise. I'll arrange for someone to handle this right away. Meanwhile, Zhang Yi and his group had already arrived at the entrance of the subway tunnel, ready to enter the railway to find the mysterious zombie king. The four were armed to the teeth. Zhang Yi once again clarified the combat plan to the group. Our mission this time is to kill the zombie king. As long as we can find it, I'm 100% confident we can eliminate it. Of course, personal safety is the most important. Don't get entangled with the zombie horde, because killing more of them is pointless. Saying this, Zhang Yi threw a glow stick into the tunnel, then said to Uncle Yu, "Uncle Yu, you go down first." As the team member with the strongest defense, Uncle Yu didn't hesitate and jumped into the hole. After looking around inside the tunnel and seeing nothing unusual, he communicated via radio, "It's normal down here, you can come down." Zhang Yi and the others slid down into the cave, and the scene before them was chilling. The walls were covered with dark bloodstains, and there were even some dismembered organs on the ground. Fortunately, they were wearing tactical helmets, otherwise, the smell here would have been unforgettable. As the group moved toward the subway, the dimly lit corridor gradually revealed numerous disjointed skeletons, likely gnawed upon by zombies. Zhang Yi, observing his surroundings cautiously, said, "It seems these zombies' only instinct is to feed, and they don't infect bodies that have already turned to bone." At that moment, Chun-Lei curiously said, "You can tell these guys have quite the appetite, but if all of Heavenly Sea City's corpses turned into zombies, that would be over 10 million zombies. What would they feed on then?" Hearing this, Zhang Yi stopped in his tracks. He had indeed not considered this issue. If the zombies ran out of food, what would they do? Would they spread out from Heavenly Sea City to other cities? Zhang Yi hesitated for a moment and said, "We can't manage that much anymore. We can only protect ourselves for now. After all, it's the apocalypse. Who has the leisure to worry about others?" The group continued their slow walk forward. Just then, Flower, leading the way, suddenly growled alertly. Instinctively, Zhang Yi and the others raised their guns, but before they could fire, a dark shadow flashed quickly in front of them. Before Zhang Yi could shoot, Lian Yu quickly threw a knife with lightning speed. With a ding, the knife struck the shadow. Upon closer inspection, everyone gasped. The knife had struck a massive rat. Chun-Lei was stunned. That rat is way too big, even several times larger than Flower in her normal state. Zhang Yi took a deep breath and said, "This must be a mutant rat. Normally, if rats have enough food, they can grow as large as cats, but the one we're seeing here is obviously excessively large, clearly a mutation." Thinking back to the gnawed corpses they had seen along the way, Zhang Yi suddenly realized the white bones we saw earlier were likely gnawed on by these types of rats. Hearing this, Chun-Lei's voice trembled. With so many corpses, there must be more than one rat, right? No sooner had he spoken than chewing sounds started coming from every corner. Zhang Yi said resignedly, "That's it then. It looks like we've walked into a rat's nest." Flower immediately issued a threatening cry, her fur puffing out. While cats have a natural dominance over rats, this advantage meant little against their overwhelming numbers. Suddenly, swarms of rats poured out from every corner like water. Zhang Yi and the others immediately took out flamethrowers and began spraying at the horde of rats. While this temporarily drove back the giant rats, they showed no signs of leaving, but instead kept their distance in the shadows, ready to pounce again the moment the flames weakened. Shadows of rats filled the darkness. If this continued, forget searching for any zombie king. These rats alone would be enough to deplete us. Seeing this situation, Zhang Yi had no choice but to tell Chun-Lei and Uncle Yu to put away the flamethrowers. The moment the flamethrowers were withdrawn, the swarm of rats surged forward like a flood. Zhang Yi immediately opened a dimensional gate on each side of the tunnel, and the rats, one after another, plunged into the alternate space, none reaching the group. Lian Yu, shocked, watched Zhang Yi from behind and said, "Your dimensional gate got an upgrade?" Zhang Yi leisurely replied, "I've been exploring the mysteries of the dimensional gate recently. After the last big battle, I've managed to open 2 dimensional gates simultaneously." Lian Yu, in disbelief, said, "No wonder you're so confident about ensuring our safe return. In this kind of tunnel terrain, this is absolutely unbeatable." The remaining rats, seeing this, had no choice but to turn around quickly, and soon the swarm of rats disappeared without a trace. After repelling the rats, the group continued deeper. Zhang Yi began to worry. The noise made while fighting the rats was significant, and he wondered if the zombies might be alerted, and he also wasn't sure about the relationship between these rats and the zombies. Zhang Yi and the others didn't have time to ponder. They did not want to stay too long in this oppressive underground space. As they walked, they noticed large shadows moving in the darkness. On closer inspection, they realized that it was a large group of zombies. Uncle Yu whispered, "They seem to be sleeping." Zhang Yi then saw clearly that was indeed the case, which wasn't surprising. As hosts for the virus, their movements require significant energy. It made sense to conserve energy by sleeping when not commanded otherwise. Uncle Yu took out the flamethrower and said, "Should we take this opportunity to burn them all to ashes?" Zhang Yi looked at the sleeping zombies and suddenly recalled what Zhou Kir had said. She mentioned that these zombies still exhibit a sort of biological behavior, strictly speaking, more like an insect swarm. If they can stay asleep, then we have no reason to wake them. But just then, a sleeping zombie suddenly opened its crimson eyes, and more zombies gradually woke up, turning and lunging at Zhang Yi and the others. Zhang Yi immediately opened a dimensional gate, but strangely, after some of the zombies poured in, they seemed to receive some kind of order and abruptly stopped in their tracks. Zhang Yi said gravely, "It seems the zombie king has noticed us. If that's the case, then let's get on with it." Speaking, he instructed Uncle Yu and Chun-Li to aim the flamethrowers at the zombie horde. The narrow tunnel instantly turned into a sea of fire, the flames spreading rapidly, and soon hundreds of zombies were consumed by the fire. The zombies began to slowly retreat, moving out of the range of the flames. Zhang Yi cautiously said, "The zombie king should be not far ahead. Let's hurry and catch up." Faced with the roaring flames, the zombies could only retreat in fear. With the invincible defense of the dimensional gate, Zhang Yi led the group forward smoothly, with Flower and Liang Yu not even needing to take action. However, Liang Yu occasionally looked back and reminded, "Those rats haven't given up. They're still watching us from the shadows. Their numbers might well exceed those of the zombies." Zhang Yi said gravely, "Let's not worry about them for now. They probably won't dare to attack again. Our target is the zombie king." Still, Liang Yu expressed concern, "But there are just too many zombies. I'm afraid we won't reach the zombie king before it flees." Zhang Yi couldn't afford to think that much. "We're already here. If need be, we'll just have to fight a war of attrition." Gradually, it seemed the number of zombies was decreasing. Zhang Yi immediately ordered, "Increase the pace of the attack." Meanwhile, outside the Radiant Prosperity base in a subway tunnel, Donghu led a group of elites to gather intelligence. Just as they entered the subway, they too were attacked by giant rats. After a fierce 15-minute battle, they managed to drive the rats back, but they lost 8 soldiers to the mutant rats' deadly bites. Originally there to investigate the zombies, Donghu looked grim, having not seen a single zombie yet, but already suffering heavy losses. How is he supposed to explain this to Xiao Honglian? Donghu said solemnly, "Let's keep moving. Our goal is to investigate the horde, and we must overcome whatever difficulties we encounter until we obtain useful information." Donghu had no choice but to lead the remaining squad members forward, despite the challenges. They hadn't walked past one station when they also encountered a large group of sleeping zombies. Before they could even react, the scent of the living woke the zombie horde, and the entire tunnel was soon packed with zombies. Knowing they were no match, Donghu shouted, "Run, and don't look back." He knew they were there to collect information, not to die. The number of zombies far exceeded his expectations, and faced with the onslaught, they could only desperately flee. Donghu threw a powerful punch, releasing flames with his pyrokinetic ability as he struck, temporarily blocking the zombies. However, the horde was too vast, potentially tens or even hundreds of thousands strong, rushing toward them like a flood. The group couldn't help but feel a chill. Although they had mentally prepared, the reality was still shocking. Donghu had no choice but to fight while retreating, trying to buy time for the remaining soldiers to escape. Suddenly, a soldier with a flamethrower shouted, "What is that?" At that moment, a huge dark figure suddenly appeared in the midst of the zombie horde. It leapt over the zombies and roared at them with its head glowing blue. Then, with a swipe of its claws, 2 soldiers were cut in half. Donghu, in despair, said, "We're not going to make it today, are we?" Meanwhile, Zhang Yi and his group were pursuing the zombie horde and soon arrived at a new station. It appeared to be a transfer station, which explained why the horde had suddenly dispersed so quickly. They had spread to other tunnels. Chun-Li helplessly looked around, like a headless fly. Suddenly, Zhang Yi spoke up, "My gut tells me we're very close to the zombie king." Just as he finished speaking, a crunching sound echoed in the tunnel, as if something was stepping on corpses, slowly approaching them. Zhang Yi immediately alerted the group, "Get ready to fight, they're coming." Suddenly, a strange black shadow appeared in the tunnel, followed by a tall and thin creature resembling a giant stick insect, slowly approaching the group. It didn't resemble a human, but had a humanoid form. Its lower jaw and arms were covered in bronze armor, and its eyes glowed a ghostly green. Uncle Yu couldn't help but speak. Could this disgusting creature be the zombie king? Before anyone could answer his question, 3 more creatures of the same appearance appeared from 3 other directions. The 4 creatures looked almost exactly the same, and Zhang Yi couldn't help but speculate. These things must be mass-produced, not naturally born. Zhang Yi's heart raced. He immediately realized this was likely a huge conspiracy. They've been leading us here step by step with the aim to surround and annihilate us. Uncle Yu, looking tense, asked, "What do we do now?" Zhang Yi smirked and said, "At this point, we can only fight. We're not in the tunnel, so the dual-dimensional gates can't be utilized to their fullest. But even so, I'm not the least bit afraid, as we are all skilled fighters." He told the group, "Liang Yu and Flower, stay close to me. Don't stray too far. These creatures look extraordinary. We must stick together." At this point, Zhang Yi and his group had no choice but to fight with their backs against the wall. They were virtually trapped, with no escape routes available. Uncle Yu and Chun-Li, one in front and one behind, wielded their flamethrowers, blasting the zombie horde. This time, the zombies didn't retreat but charged at them like moths to a flame. As Zhang Yi had anticipated, they must have been following the zombie king's command, devoid of fear or the instinct to avoid being burned. As Liang Yu swung her long sword, glowing like moonlight, her strength had greatly increased after absorbing the werewolf's abilities, making dealing with these zombies seem as easy as slicing vegetables. Suddenly, a bronze-armored zombie grabbed 2 other zombies and hurled them towards Zhang Yi. Seeing this, Zhang Yi calmly opened a dimensional gate, and the zombies were instantly sucked into the alternate space. Seeing this, the bronze-armored zombie charged furiously, and Chun-Li, terrified, shouted, "Boss, they're they're charging at us. Underground, Chun-Li's abilities could not be used, and he had to rely on his flamethrower to maintain combat effectiveness. Strangely enough, the intense heat of the flamethrower seemed to have no effect on the bronze-armored zombie. As the bronze-armored zombie closed in, Zhang Yi spread his arms wide, and suddenly two massive gates appeared, sealing the passage both front and back. However, it only blocked two directions, and zombies from other directions continued to charge fiercely. Uncle Yu, visibly angry, said, "These guys must be commanded by the Zombie King, but if we can't even kill the bronze-armored zombie, how can we kill the Zombie King?" Zhang Yi calmly said, "This is not the time to panic. The more critical the situation, the more we need to stay calm and observe carefully. My intuition tells me that the Zombie King is nearby." Hearing this, Uncle Yu roared and transformed into a towering figure over 2 meters tall, then charged at a bronze-armored zombie. At that moment, Yang Yu leaped high and swung a powerful sword strike, slicing a long cut across the zombie's chest before it could react, from which a soy sauce-colored viscous fluid slowly oozed. Both sides showed a hint of surprise. Liang Yu didn't expect that her full-force strike didn't cut the creature in half. It seemed only to have pierced its outer skin. Her full-force strike was powerful enough to split a tank. At that moment, Zhang Yi said to Flower nearby, "Flower, it's your turn to go in. Help Uncle Yu first." Zhang Yi then turned his attention to Liang Yu and shouted, "Liang Yu, be careful. Their defense is incredibly strong, but they are not invincible." Liang Yu quickly retreated upon hearing this. Divine might. The next second, the space around the bronze-armored zombie distorted. In just an instant, the upper body of the defensively formidable zombie was nearly obliterated, leaving only its legs standing on the ground. Chun-Li was initially stunned, then suddenly burst into arrogant laughter, grabbing the flamethrower and spraying wildly at the zombie horde, while laughing madly, "Watch me burn you all to death." Liang Yu was completely stunned by Zhang Yi's divine might and couldn't help but exclaim, "That move of yours is just too unbeatable. I reckon no one in all of Heavenly Sea City could withstand that strike of yours." Zhang Yi smiled lightly and said nonchalantly, "Just basic stuff." He then looked at Uncle Yu and said, "Now's not the time to relax. I suspect that after we've taken care of these bronze-armored zombies, the Zombie King will probably make an appearance. If we don't find and eliminate the Zombie King today, this mission will be considered a failure." Just then, a deep roar came from deep within the tunnel. Suddenly, heavy footsteps echoed through one of the passages, and then 3 bronze-armored zombies appeared before them again. Zhang Yi almost despaired. What's going on? How can so many of such powerful creatures be made? Zhang Yi's divine might was extremely taxing on his physical strength, and given his current stored energy, he estimated he could use it at most 5 times. Moreover, there was a significant cooldown time after each use. If the remaining 6 bronze-armored zombies charged at once, Zhang Yi and his group would have no chance of holding them off. Chun-Li's legs went weak in an instant. "This is it. My glorious life is probably coming to an end." Zhang Yi's expression grew even grimmer. The situation was worse than he had anticipated. The entity behind these zombies was also far beyond his expectations, and it might be too late to wrap things up. Zhang Yi shouted to Uncle Yu and Flower, "Quick, come over here." At his call, the man and the cat swiftly leaped back to Zhang Yi's side, and Zhang Yi also closed the dual-dimensional gates. At that critical moment, with no restraint from all directions, zombies with bared fangs lunged at them fiercely. Just in the nick of time, Zhang Yi opened a dimensional gate in front of everyone and told them, "Follow me into the alternate space." The group quickly vanished into the gateway, and by the time the zombie horde arrived, they met only air, filling the tunnel with eerie roars of frustration. On the snowy surface above the subway, a dimensional gate abruptly opened, and Zhang Yi and his companions stepped out from it. Zhang Yi, clutching his chest, said with a lingering fear, "That was terrifying." Liang Yu, curiously stepping forward, asked, "Is this a new skill you've developed?" Zhang Yi, somewhat shyly, responded, "It's not really a new ability, just a new understanding of the dimensional gate." Previously, his understanding of the dimensional gate was rather basic, but when he managed to open 2 gates simultaneously, he had an epiphany about a completely new way to use them, to transform the 2 gates into a passageway through space. He can now traverse distances up to 300 meters. This is why he was so confident this time to venture into the unknown depths of the subway tunnel. Chun-Li, whose legs had gone weak from fright, nearly wet himself and said with relief, "Boss, why didn't you mention this skill earlier? I really thought I was a goner just now."